All right, good morning. I see Cindy has first blood and Patrick joins us as well. Good morning. All right. So, this morning we're going to talk about taxes, tariffs, and lies. I know it's election season. We've got just over right at a week and a half before election day, and yes, the election is pretty much going to be what we're talking about almost every morning. Because, it's an important decision, it's an important election, and it's important that we do our due diligence. This episode of my show in particular, I want you guys to share because I'm going to be talking about something very specific, and that is the lie that's being one of the many lies that's being perpetrated by the Harris campaign. So let me preface this. I'm old enough that I've seen more than a few presidential elections. And many of my audience are as well. I know my audience tends to the retiree, even if not all of you watching today are in that category. But most of my audience, we tend to be more in the 35 and above bracket. Okay, fair enough. But that means that you've seen at least a couple of presidential elections, and you may not have even paid close attention to them before, but I've seen enough and paid close attention to enough of them that, quite frankly, the level of lies in this election from one side are shocking. And I've talked about this a few times already, a little bit. I've touched on it a little bit. Of course, I referenced the original campaign with was it Jefferson and Adams, where the smear was, my opponent has a hermaphroditic character with neither the firmness of the firmness and reliability of a man nor the gentleness and courtesy of a woman. Paraphrasing, but even there was an accusation being made about the character of the person, not a specific fact claim about Adam's actual gender makeup, which interestingly enough is because the claim predated the concept of gender. There was sex and not gender. But even there, he was making a specific claim about the character of the person, not an explicit lie about the claims made by the opponent. The Harris campaign is telling you some very specific lies. And the one that bothers me the most is we keep hearing this psychotic refrain that Donald Trump intends to institute a national sales tax, a 20% national sales tax that will increase all of your annual costs by $4,000, more than $4,000 per person. Okay. They are playing a fun little game with semantics to try and create this lie. And it's two-tiered. One, what she's actually talking about is Trump's proposed tariffs on foreign goods. And I'll get back to that in a minute. But the other thing that they're counting on is that many people have heard Republicans and libertarians talk about the fair tax, which does include a 20 to 23% national sales tax. Now, Donald Trump has not talked about the fair tax plan in his campaign at all. He has talked about implementing a tariff. Now, keep in mind, before 1913, tariffs were the only way that it was legal for the government to collect revenue. When the IRS was created, the monster from Jekyll Island, as it's been called, and the IRS and the income tax were created in 1913, the Democrats campaigned on the idea that this will be an income tax, and it will only be on those evil top 1%ers, those mean old millionaires in New England, and it will never be higher than 2%. 2%. It will never be higher than 2%. That was in 1913. By the 20s, it was already in the 30 to 40% range across the span of that decade, culminating with a top marginal income tax rate in 1945 of 90%. That's insane. If you were to confiscate all of the wealth of all of the billionaires that live in America today, you would fund the government for less than a quarter. One fiscal quarter. Excuse me. Now, so they're relying on a two-stage lie. Sorry, guys. You'll have to forgive me. I have had a little bit of a cough this week. So I'll try not to make too many gross noises into the microphone this morning. I apologize for that. But so the two-tier lie, they're hoping that you will conflate the tariff with the national sales tax. They're hoping that you'll conflate the tariffs with the national sales tax put forward by the fair tax plan. Keep in mind, the fair tax plan, if it were even part of the conversation, does propose a national sales tax, but is predicated on that sales tax being there to replace revenue by all other tax, because it eliminates corporate taxes. It eliminates corporate taxes. It eliminates income taxes. Thank you, Cameron. I'll try to pay attention to that, etc. So the fair tax plan eliminates the majority of your individual taxes, except for that national sales tax. So they're hoping that you conflate those two. Now, what the tariff does is it penalizes American businesses who are sending labor overseas. So yes, some goods will be more expensive. They are trying to have it both ways in making these arguments, because Kamala Harris is herself proposing an increase in corporate taxes in the U.S. So let me clear this up for you. Let me explain you how this works. I will accept the premise that a tariff is akin to a sales tax on foreign goods for the purposes of explaining how prices increase. Because entities other than the end consumer, so you and me, the retail consumer, if you are anything other than the retail consumer purchasing an item, you are incapable. It is metaphysically impossible for you to pay taxes. They may collect taxes from you, but when they collect taxes from the non-end user retail customer, the taxes being collected are a function of the calculation of the price of the end product. So just very basically, I produce a product. It costs me $10 to produce it. I want to make a 50% profit. I charge $15 to my consumer. The government wants taxes. So I increase the price of my product to $20. Now, I still cover my $10 cost. I still get my $5 profit. And y'all are saying there's something weird with the audio. I still get my $5 profit. And I still have the $5 that the government wants to collect in taxes. Okay, cool. The end user pays the taxes. And then, of course, that end user pays their whatever 5, 6, 7, 8% sales tax wherever they're buying it. Granted, that is in fact how taxes work. Now I need Kamala to explain to me how it is that the corporate income or the corporate tax is different than tariffs. She can't do it. She can't afford to do it because here's the real problem. A tariff is only on those foreign goods, whereas the corporate tax is on domestic goods and foreign goods. Because what will happen is that corporate tax will be applied to American corporations, which includes the importers and exporters that bring you those foreign goods. So the result becomes excuse me. So the result becomes that all of your prices are increased by that corporate tax. Now let's talk about the Laffer Curve. Because before I get to the Laffer Curve. So if Trump's tariff on foreign goods is the same as a sales tax, a national sales tax, then it is only a national sales tax on foreign goods. Whereas if a tax on an entity other than the end retail user is in fact a national sales tax, then Kamala is proposing a much larger and more egregious national sales tax. It's that simple. Now, the fact that she's making the claim that Donald Trump will increase your annual costs by around $4,000, bitch, please. The Biden-Harris economy has increased your national costs on average by about 12 grand. It's like 11,973 is the average or something. About 12 grand. Okay, I don't know about you, but that's, what is that, 3 times as bad? Remember the other day, the reporter with the blacky mustache said, so immigration is quadrupled under your watch, Kamala. Yes, and then we cut it in half. Bitch, that's still double. Like, even if we give it to you, that's still double. Now, the Laffer Curve is a mathematical model that talks to us, at least in this application, about tax rates. And the theory is that there's a break point. So, historically, we have had periods where we have lowered taxes. And it doesn't matter which taxes are lowered. In fact, the more taxes lowered, the better. The Laffer Curve details the break point where you get diminishing returns. And every time we've lowered taxes, revenues increase. You lower the tax rate, and tax revenue increases. That's because the less you tax, the more economic activity occurs, the more individual taxes are collected, and they're collected on a much larger pie. Right? So you can have 20%, or you can have 50% of $1 billion economy, or 20% of $1 trillion economy. And the Laffer Curve shows us that there is a point at which you get diminishing returns where you're not taxing enough to maintain that level of revenue. So we're talking practicality within the confines of the current existence of taxes. Danny points out JFK was the first to do it. That's correct. And the result was increased tax revenue. But there's a point at which the more you tax, you cause the revenues to fall because there's so much tax being paid that there's no economic growth, right? If 90% of my business revenue has to go to taxation before I even start covering overhead, then, I'm not buying groceries. That's called math. So let's take a look at how they're selling this. She's run a bunch of ads like this one here, where this woman says she's a Trump supporting Republican. She voted for him twice.
Out of money, I know 20 of you, and you're rich as hell. We're going to give you tax cuts. We're going to pay you.
I am not rich as hell. I work hard. I scrape to get by. Donald Trump wants to give tax breaks to billionaires, but Kamala Harris has plans to help us. She's going to crack down on price gouging and cut taxes for working people like me. I voted for Donald.
Now, she has said, I'm going to cut taxes for people, for the middle class. I'm going to cut taxes for working people, etc. She hasn't given any details on how that works. Trump has, however, said very explicitly that he wants to do the tariff. And, funny story, he did tariffs the first time around, and Biden-Harris kept them in place because they fucking work. But what does Kamala have to say on the subject?
So these are some of the ways, but we've got to increase the corporate tax rate. We also have to increase taxes for the top 1%. And that part of that is going to be about repealing that tax bill that they just passed.
She wants to repeal the tax cuts and increase taxes on corporations, like I just said. It is this simple. A corporate tax is a tariff on American businesses. Trump's plan is to use tariffs to make it more difficult for foreigners to compete in the American market so that Americans can make money in the American market. Kamala's plan is precisely the opposite, to punish Americans for doing business in America. Her plan is to offshore American productivity. And this is all in service of the same self-serving psychopathy of the left that we've discussed many times before. There is this perception in America among the common midwit and low information voter that the right, that the Republican Party is the party of old rich white men, and that's the only people they care about is old rich white men. And the Democrats are the party of the people and the party of the poor, and they really, really care about the poor people. So if you're poor, if your life sucks, you should go vote for a Democrat. A Democrat who's promising to do things like implement corporate taxes to make sure that your prices go up and you stay poor. Institute wealth taxes to make sure that if you figure out how to stop being poor, fuck you, you're going to be poor anyway. And then an unrealized capital gains tax. So if you do manage to scrape and figure shit out and buy yourself a piece of property, you're going to have to sell it to pay the taxes on it if it happens to increase in value, which, by the way, property tends to. So, at the end of the day, they want you to believe that the Republican Party is the party of old, crusty white dudes, which, okay, yeah, I voted Republican. And the Democrat Party is the party of the poor. And as it turns out, if what is in your best interest is that there are more people out there who will vote for you, then your policies tend to create more poor people. Democrats like poor people so much that they're going out of their way to manufacture them and import them. That's why they're all about taxing corporations to increase your prices and offshore your jobs, while at the same time importing cannibal Haitians. Y'all, do you understand how severe the border crisis is? Nearly 10% of the population counted by the 2020 census are in some state of undocumented presence. 5% of the population of Haiti has been moved to the United States over the last 10 years. The severity of the border crisis cannot be overstated, and it is all in service of the idea that the poor vote for Democrats. And I know. Oh, but it's illegal for poor people to vote in American elections. Okay, thing one, the DOJ is absolutely suing Virginia to prevent them from removing, I shit you not, 6,000 self-identified, as in they filled out a form to get a driver's license and checked the box that says, I am not an American citizen, and were registered to vote anyway. The DOJ is suing Virginia to keep those 6,000 non-citizens, they're not all illegal aliens, but they are non-citizens, off of, or to keep them on the voter registration. And here's the other piece. JK mentions China CCCP police stations in the USA. We covered that when that news first broke. That's been a few years since it broke, though. But the other one, okay, so they can't vote in the election. However, their presence and their having been counted on the census because the citizenship question isn't asked has awarded somewhere between 6 and 8 additional electoral college votes to places like California. That means that whether or not they go and check a ballot, they still get to vote for president just by living in California or Texas. Right? So their mere presence, because we have a system of apportionment based on the census. Sergeant Major says Georgia is doing the same thing with self-identification non-citizens. Yes, but the DOJ isn't currently suing Georgia to keep our non-citizens on the voter registration, at least as far as I know. I haven't read anything to the contrary. So, damn, old man, you broke my train of thought. I lost my spot. But yes, so I'm going to wrap it up right there. Basically, when you hear the Dems talk about the so-called Trump national sales tax, they're talking about the tariffs. They're talking about the idea of putting tariffs on foreign products. And he's been very clear, it's only on certain foreign products. Such a tariff will not be applied to foreign products which are not also produced domestically. Because, part of the point is stuff like, hey, you tried to buy a steak lately? $20 a pound, $25 a pound for a shitty steak at a Walmart? That's because a lot of that beef is being imported. And, we talked to Oh, Dad. I was talking to a cattle rancher the other day, and he had about 30 head of cattle, but he said he was spending about $3,600 a month on maintaining them, on feed. I think he said that was for feed alone. And so they've got to incur that cost for that herd for 2 years before they butcher them. It's insane. Mom says we should have tariffs. We should only have tariffs. We should only have tariffs, no income tax, and if the government cannot fund its operations with what it makes in revenue off of tariffs, then it's doing too much work. It's that simple. But I'm going to stop coughing in your ears. I actually have more than I want to say on this topic, but I feel like I'm going to keep coughing this morning. So I'm going to go drink some cough medicine and then handle some business. Y'all be safe out there. Thanks for watching this morning. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.